Hello everyone. I'm in Bangalore with one of my most favorite entrepreneurs in India, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. I have known her for 25 years. In this very building was the first time I came here in 2000. You need to know this. I just passed out of Ahmedabad, and Nana Lal, your dear friend and a board member, was the vice chairman of J. Morgan Stanley. My first meeting with her was coming to Bangalore and spending half a day in this campus 25 years back.
Wow.
Okay. And Kiran, I have seen your evolution from a pure play enzyme company to number of products. And when I say most companies have their Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, Biocon is one company where in any product I have never seen yet a Mahesh, and we'll talk about that. She has a lot of accomplishments. I will put them in the description for you guys to see. And if I spend 1 hour talking about her, then I won't be able to talk about my questions. Straight to the point. Kiran, first question is I still have one notebook from 2004 when I took notes.
Wow.
And I'll start first with the way you've hired motivated people. Then I'll get to your dad a bit because I know you were really close to him. Then your journey of entrepreneurship, Biocon, and so on. Actually, let's start with your dad. He created Kingfisher beer, am I right?
That's right.
So you need to know this trivia. He's the creator of Kingfisher beer, which means he was a brewer.
Yes.
You top Bangalore University.
Yes.
You go to your dad and he tells you, Beta, why don't you go to Australia, become a brewer? How did that come about? Let's start there.
So, I was very keen on pursuing applied biology
Okay.
or applied biotech in those days. It was very early days of biotech, but I was quite fascinated with the notion of how you sort of leverage biology and, create a technology out of it. So I went to my dad and I said, do you have any ideas for me? I want to pursue biotechnology in my, further studies. And he said, why don't you do brewing? Because he was a brewer. And I said, are you crazy? I said, brewing. He said, yeah, because, don't mock it. Brewing is fermentation science. It is the oldest biotechnology known to man. And, it's an amazing science because it's about understanding microbes, understanding fermentation, understanding biology, and using it to do something useful. In his case, it was beer.
Of course.
And he said, so why don't you try it? And I said, I don't think it's suitable for a woman, I said to him. So he said, why do you make it so gender specific? I think, science and technology is for everyone. There should be no gender barrier. And go for it. You want biotechnology? You ask me for advice. This is the advice I'm giving you. So I thought, what the hell? Why not? And then my dad has confidence in me. And he said to me, actually, India is now beginning to grow in terms of breweries and we need good brewers. So why don't you go? You'll get a very good job as soon as you finish your program. So I said, okay. So I got this scholarship to go to Australia to study brewing.
Yes.
And I went. And of course, I did very well in my Master Brewers program.
I heard that you went to Ballarat.
That's right.
Where people go typically for Gold Rush, 150 years back.
There's Sovereign Hill in
Because
Ballarat.
I'd done a holiday there and there's an interesting story. So people go to Ballarat to do Gold Rush and you actually get a gold medal from the very place. But that's a question from Seema. She told me you should ask it this way. So credit goes to her. Tell me about the Ballarat, the experience and being the only woman in the course.
So, obviously, the brewing industry is a very male-dominated industry. It is a male bastion. And so it was not unusual for me to be the only woman in the class. All my colleagues were, brewers from different countries, including Australia, who had some experience of working in a brewery for a couple of years, and their breweries would send them here to do the Master Brewers program. And I was the only one who had absolutely zero industry experience, and I was fresh from university. I just finished my BSc in zoology honors, and I said, okay, I'm going to pursue this program. But it actually helped me to grow up very fast because I had to compete with male colleagues, but that was okay. Decided to basically put my mind, apply my mind to brewing science, and I found it fascinating. So, of course, I topped the class. My colleagues were very, very good to me, I would say, because they felt they had to look after me. They felt that I was the only woman, so they were very kind to me. But having said that, I was very competitive as well. So I think I did impress my colleagues. Finally, they must have said, "Why did we help her so much?" Because she topped the class. But anyway, jokes apart, I think I was very excited with the fact that I had topped my brewing program. I came back to India thinking that, I'd be
welcome, red carpet.
Yeah, absolutely, that I'd easily be absorbed by any brewery. In fact, they'll be vying for me. But I was rudely shocked. So every brewery I went to absolutely recognized the fact that I had the right credentials, but they also told me that they considered me high risk because they don't have a single woman in their breweries.
Wow.
And they said, look, I think it's a big risk for us to hire you, even though you're very accomplished, because we believe that it would be very difficult for you as a woman to deal with labor unions, with the labor itself. And the kind of timings we have for brewing are not really conducive to women. And I said, I don't care. I said, I'm willing to take on that challenge. And they said, you may be, but we are not. So I found it very difficult to get a job in a brewery. So they would call me to troubleshoot. Okay. So there were breweries who would suffer from some fermentation contamination, and they would say, "Come and help us solve this." And for that, they didn't mind me spending overnight
also, if need be.
if need be. But when it came to getting a job with them, they would say, "Look, consulting is one thing, but we can't give you a job." So I realized that there was a huge gender bias, and it was very frustrating, disillusioning for me. And I then decided, okay, maybe India is not the country where I pursue brewing. And so I was actually looking for jobs elsewhere when I had this accidental encounter with an Irish biotech entrepreneur.
You're supposed to take a Rajdhani Express, I hear, right?
Right. I was just actually, I had got a job in Scotland in a brewery.
Okay.
And I was on my way there, and just before I boarded the Rajdhani Express in the morning, I got a call from this Irish entrepreneur, biotech entrepreneur, and said, "Look, I've heard about you. I've tracked you down because he'd heard about me from my Australian days, and I want to make a proposal to you saying, can you join me in setting up a biotech company in India?"
Wow.
And I said, first and foremost, it's a great offer, but I'm not the right person. I said, I'm a woman in a country that's very hostile to women in the business world. I don't have any money to my name, and I have zero business experience. So I don't think I'm the right partner for you. I think I'll introduce you to very successful business people. In fact, I'm going to Delhi to meet a very successful business person. And why don't you start this joint venture with him?
So here is someone giving you an offer and you are helping him find someone else.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he basically did come and meet the person I introduced him to in Delhi, but he came back to me saying, look, I'm looking for an entrepreneur. I'm not looking for a mature businessman. And I see that, entrepreneurial spirit in you. So give it a go. Don't get intimidated by this notion that business is very difficult. And I'm there to mentor you and help you. So why don't you join me? And he said, look, if you don't enjoy the offer I'm giving you after a year, I'll help you find a job. So with that kind of an offer, I thought, what have I got to lose?
Downside protected completely.
Yes. So I decided to go to Ireland, learn about enzyme technology, which was very similar to what I had learned in brewing, because brewing science is all about enzymes.
Yeah.
So it was very familiar to me, except that this was all about making enzymes from microbial fermentation. And I learned a lot about that technology. I helped to, in fact, develop some of those technologies even when I was in Ireland. And I came back to India full of zest, saying, hey, good, this is something quite interesting. And of course, I came back to India to set up Biocon in India. And of course, it was at the height of the license Raj.
This is
1978.
Oh, yes. And after the emergency.
Yes. And, I was a 25-year-old entrepreneur, a woman at that, with 10,000 rupees in the bank. And here I was trying to start a biotech company, which nobody understood.
Yes.
I went to, of course, I would spend many days in the corridors of Udyog Bhavan trying to get this license to start up a joint venture. And it was very interesting because I had a very kind bureaucrat. I still remember his name, Mr. Bishwas.
Wow.
From what they used to call the DGTD, who used to give you these licenses. And he basically said to me that, I went to him saying, look, I really don't know how to set up this company and this joint venture. And I'm told that, I was quite candid. I said, I'm told that there's a lot of money involved in getting a license. And I'm so naive that I don't know how much, who needs to be paid that amount, when it needs to be paid, and whether I should do it at all. So I said, I'm really confused because I really don't want to bribe anybody. And if you say that I have to do it, then I better just give up starting a company. And he said, not at all. I don't know who's been filling your mind with all this. You don't have to pay anybody anything. You just come here and I'll help you get your license. So he's the one that told me how to fill up that form. And he, in 2 weeks, approved my application and gave me the license. I'll never forget that.
Wow.
So I had the best experience with the government bureaucracy, which was otherwise described as being corrupt, if you know what I mean. So I started off literally in my garage back in Bangalore in 1978, November 78.
How did you hire people?
That was very difficult because I found it very difficult. First and foremost, as a woman, even though I was full of, determination and courage and, this great zest to start something on my own,
yes.
I found it very difficult because banks found me a high risk. They didn't want to lend to me. See, I just wanted credit lines, and even that banks were not willing to give me.
Even when you have an order?
Yes.
Wow.
So it was very disturbing for me, saying, my God. And they would keep saying, you need to give me a guarantee, some collateral. I had no collateral to offer. I said, I'll give you the guarantee. And they said, no, your father needs to give a guarantee. I said, why should my father give a guarantee? He has nothing to do with my business. But anyway, to cut the long story short, even people didn't want to work for me. They would come for an interview. They'd look at me thinking I'm the secretary. And when I used to tell them I'm the managing director, I knew immediately it was written on their faces they didn't want the job. So I found it very difficult to hire people. And I realized that there was a huge gender apprehension, gender bias, whatever you call it. But slowly by surely, I did build that company in a very interesting way. In fact, I call myself the first tech startup in India.
Absolutely.
Because the people who were bold enough to join me were young engineers from IIT.
In fact, I have a notebook from 2004, Kiran. Yes. I should have gotten the notebook. I'll show you next time. I have notes from people in your team. Ajay Bharadwaj, I have notes from him.
Yes.
Arun Chandrabakar, Ajay was from IIT Delhi, Arun was from MIT, Dr. Gautam Das Sinjin. It's impossible to hire someone who's from MIT. How did you hire people like Ajay, Arun, Dr. Das?
They were all very curious to meet me because they suddenly, I was being kind of, suddenly I started emerging as an interesting entrepreneur who's starting a biotech company,
Yes.
who's trying to build a biotech company. And and actually they started reaching out to me saying, "What are you doing? Tell us." And I remember Shri Suryanarayan was another young engineer from IIT Chennai, Madras, those days. And Delhi, sorry, he was in Delhi by the time when I started dealing with him. And he came to me saying, I'm very curious to know what you're doing. And then I told him what I was doing. I was developing enzyme technology. And he said, "Oh, I need to actually use some of these enzymes because I'm doing a project for my master's degree using enzymes. Can I buy some enzymes for you?" And I was so excited. I said, "Oh, my first sale of enzymes. And the guy wanted only 100 grams of enzymes. And I gave him a quote. And he said, "Oh, it's very expensive. I'll have to pay it out of my own pocket. Can you give me a discount?" Then I felt so sorry for him. I said, "No, no, I'll donate it to you as long as you, mention me in your project, in your thesis." So he said, "Of course I'll do it." So then when he came to me after he got his master's MTech, he came to me saying, "Kiran, I want your advice. I've got into some of the big universities for my PhD program in Rutgers University, in UC, SC, and various big
the top colleges.
top colleges, Ann Arbor. What do you think which university should I join?" I said, "How about if you did a real world PhD with me?"
Wow.
I said, "Why don't you join me?"
Wow.
And he actually joined me, and till today he says to me, "You owe me an honorary doctorate. You've got so many honorary doctorates and I don't even have one." I said, "No, no, it's my job to get you an honorary doctorate," because he's a brilliant guy. He started his own
some of your people have
C6 Energy, which is a very unique company developing biofuels from seaweed.
Wow. In fact, even Arun now runs $1 billion, I think, a unicorn.
That's Ajay.
That's Ajay. Okay.
Arun, of course, was an interesting guy because he was a young engineer who had heard about me. He came down to India to look for a job before he got his PhD. And he came and met us. He was very excited with what I was doing in Bangalore with all my team. And he said to me, "I'd love to join you." And I said, "Oh, wonderful. I'd love to have you join us." And I remember all of us huddling together saying, "Hey, this guy's from MIT. We better pay him a lot." So we actually decided to make him an offer which was double of what we were paying ourselves.
Even more than what you were paying yourself?
I always had the same
Wow.
salary as my team. But the team itself decided we had to double that salary for Arun because he was an MIT guy. And we all agreed we should make him that offer. So we made him an offer. And I mean, we told him what we could afford to pay him. And later, I found that Hindustan Lever Research Center had made him double our offer. So I said, "There's no way he's going to join us." Okay. And 6 months later, I get a call from Arun saying, "What happened to my offer letter?" I said, "Oh, I thought you were not joining us." He said, "Of course I'm only joining you." I said, "Oh, I thought you got a bigger offer." He said, "Yeah, I might have got a bigger offer, but I want to join you." And that's how he joined us. And of course, later on, Arun became the CEO of Biocon. So it's been a very exciting journey for me, building the company with these brilliant young engineers and scientists and doing some very exciting stuff with them. And as you said, that built the right culture.
You've had one of the most wonderful cultures because I've met enough companies over the last 25 years. Now I want to come to some character traits of entrepreneurs. I lost my dad last year.
I'm so
And
sorry.
he always used to say, "Beta, ऊपर जाना है, grit चाहिए, ऊपर रहना है, gratitude चाहिए." Simple. G, grit and gratitude. Kiran, you epitomize grit. Nadal, he will make you hit that extra ball. And I had this boss in Japan who used to say, "Nana korobi yaoki, fall 7 times, get up 8." You clearly epitomize that by far. And hats off to you for that because I've seen your setbacks, whether it's on a personal front or products, but you've come out and head on you've taken up the problem and you've come out shining across products and cycles. Talk about that first. Importance of grit. How do you get the energy? Where does it come from?
So, I've always believed that I want to lead and not follow. Okay, so when you want to do that, you have to differentiate yourself. You have to, tread on a path that's untrodden. You have to do things which others haven't done.
Absolutely.
And so you've seen that in my journey, I've
Absolutely.
always challenged the status quo. So if you look at when I got into biopharma, because I decided enzymes was a great business, but it wasn't going to get me to the scale I wanted to get to. And I realized that to get to that scale, I needed to pivot to biopharma and leverage all my technologies that I developed for enzymes to develop biopharmaceuticals or biologics instead. And that was a great decision we made. Now, in order to do that, I looked at the pharmaceutical industry, which was a fairly mature industry by the time I got into it.
Yes.
And I realized that Indian pharma was really very successful because it was developing generics, which were all developed from, they were all developed from chemical synthesis.
Yes.
And it was sort of re-engineering molecules in that sense because, India is very strong at chemistry and biochemistry. And so I saw that all these companies were very good at chemistry and they were synthesizing these molecules almost as if it was a sort of a mechanical process.
Just like assembly line.
Correct. So I decided, well, I want to do something different. And I realized that no one was looking at fermentation-based small molecules. Nobody was looking at recombinant DNA technology. I said, we should do that because that could differentiate us significantly from instead of being a me too. So that's where I kind of decided to focus on.
And fermentation uses fungi.
Yes. So we started with fungal technology to begin with to make statins.
Absolutely.
And then we looked at recombinant DNA technology to make insulin.
The first.
Yes.
Apart from the two big ones, right?
Yes. And again, it was a very interesting strategy because I realized that, of course, the fungal fermentation and the proprietary technology that we had for fungal fermentation allowed us to basically get out of certain patent challenges. And that's how the companies that we partnered with for supplying the APIs could launch the statins ahead of time.
Absolutely.
Okay, that was quite interesting for us.
Nova, Simva, Prava.
Because we were able to actually help our partners do that. That time we were just focusing on APIs. But then I looked at insulin. Insulin became quite an interesting opportunity for us because we had a proprietary yeast technology for recombinant DNA technology. And I said, a recombinant DNA technology is agnostic to the protein or peptide it produces. So whether I make enzymes or whether I make insulins, it should be the same. And I said, let's try it out. And eureka, it worked. It was expressing insulin. So I said, okay, the reason I got into insulin is because I realized that India was at the epicenter of diabetes. We were importing all our insulins. 90% of that insulin was animal insulin, which I thought was very unethical. Only 10% of the insulin was recombinant human insulin because that's all, it was only the rich who could afford that. So affluence was linked to recombinant human insulin, and I wanted to disrupt that. I said, look, as a country that's burdened with insulin-dependent diabetics, we must make sure they can afford human insulin. And I said, let's disrupt that price point of human insulin. And that's how we developed the first recombinant human insulin, that too on a proprietary technology. And therefore, I'm very proud of the fact that we are the third insulin company in the world. Because, Lilly develops its insulins using E. coli. Novo develops its insulins using Saccharomyces, and Biocon uses Pichia. And that made me feel very proud of the fact that I was not a me too. I was not just trying to copy what the others were doing, but we were developing our own technology.
One question here. By the way, you've what, 7 billion doses developed and delivered in the. That's a lot. That's like one dose per human being.
Yes. Oh,
That's
that's a nice
that's
way of putting it.
But that's commendable. That is genuinely commendable. But on this, see, when you copy something, there's a path that you have to copy. When you try something new, in a world of candles, you want to try bulbs, everything's new.
Yeah.
It's a different risk profile, different decision making.
But it's a calculated risk.
Yes.
You
This is,
see,
tell me.
I think as an entrepreneur, I've realized you've got to take risk. Okay? Entrepreneurs take risk.
Yes.
Some of it can be wild risk, some of it can be calculated risk. I have taken wild risks based on novel innovation, but in a very cautious way. And I've taken calculated risks where I know what I'm doing. Like insulin was a calculated risk because I knew the product
is there.
the market is there, we can develop the product, and it can make a difference. So I think that was a very important strategy for me. How do we take a calculated risk to develop products that we know that there's a market for? So insulin was in that category.
Okay.
Biosimilars was in that category. But I've also taken other risks. The other risks being novel molecules. I've developed Biomab, which is an anti-EGFR antibody. It's a completely novel
Absolutely novel.
molecule.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I actually did that again because I felt that India needed these kind of products for cancer patients. Now, it's very interesting, Ajay, that when I developed Biomab, it was a new molecule, novel molecule, but I was competing with a chimeric, and this was a humanized EGFR. I was competing with a chimeric EGFR that was being marketed by Big Pharma in India. And I was trying to tell the physicians and the prescribers that, look, guys, my product is superior to that because mine doesn't cause the kind of skin toxicity that the chimeric drug is causing. But do you think they would accept it coming from an Indian company? No, because they don't follow science. And they kept saying, well, the multinationals tell us that skin toxicity is a surrogate marker of efficacy. And I would say that's absolutely wrong because I showed them, scientific papers to the contrary, but it was not acceptable. Finally, the recognition is there that our drug is superior to the multinational drug. And for the first time, Biomab has finally overtaken in India the Western drug. But it's taken too long. So, to really get this market and the physicians and the prescribers to appreciate what you're doing is very tough. The second molecule also was like that, itolizumab. Again, a very novel drug with a very novel mechanism of action. I really believe that's a fabulous drug. I still have to prove that to the world. Of course, we used itolizumab during COVID to save 50,000 lives because that's the way it works. It prevents cytokine release syndrome. I mean, it it doesn't allow the cytokines to form. And today we licensed the drug to a small US biotech company who were trying to develop PPFR and TGF beta. I mean, this is sounding very highfalutin science. But just to give you an example, I had developed an EGFR, so I knew how that worked. So EGFR is a drug that basically works on solid tumors and shrinks them. But, it has never lived up to its promise because it doesn't finally kill it altogether. So I felt that EGFR is a very overly expressed target on many solid tumors. So I needed to get a combination drug that also directs T cells to kill that tumor after it shrinks. So the whole point was hook onto the solid tumor using EGFR and direct the T cells to kill it. That was the concept. And we actually did a lot of that research here, found that it actually works. But when it had to go into the clinic, I decided I've had too many failures in India to value such products, right? Because it's like India does not value high or differentiated or unique
Absolutely.
novel innovation. So I said it's better to kind of create that value in the US. So we set up a company called Bicara Therapeutics in Boston. We then got into the clinic with this asset that we had developed in our labs in Bangalore. And last year we had a very successful IPO, which got it $1 billion valuation, and now it's in the phase 2, phase 3 pivotal studies as a very differentiated molecule for head and neck cancer.
Now I have to introduce you to they're doing liquid biopsy using stem cells to predict cancer in stage 0, stage 1. Again, Indian company. Just remind me, I will introduce.
No, I know that company,
Yeah,
and of course
Tripatis.
yes, I know them.
Because they just
yeah, so it's a very interesting concept, and we have to make sure that it pans out the way they expect it to.
Exactly.
So drug discovery and drug development is a very, very difficult journey. So first you conceptualize something.
Yes.
Then you develop the molecule. Then you take it into a preclinical stage, and then finally it's the clinical data that finally shows whether it's what you think it is.
So I want to now talk a bit about decision making and your love for golf. I remember meeting John, and I think he loved golf and football. I have vague memories now.
Absolutely.
And both of you also met on a golf course. Is
yes.
So now I also love the game now. Okay. Your backswing is slow. It's preparation. And your downswing, once you've decided, you've taken your iron, you know what you're hitting.
I love your analogies.
Right? You have to accelerate. So when you decide, decision making is deliberate, it's slow. But once you've decided, you have to go at it. If you have second thoughts of the wind and the green is this way and that way, you screw up. How do you manage this part of deliberate decision making, and then when it's execution time, go for it, accelerate, no looking back?
So I've always found that when you want to get into a new area, you first study that area and see, is there an unmet need? And if there's an unmet need, how do you fill that need? How do you fill that gap? And do you have a differentiator? Are you looking at a strategy that actually addresses the need in a very effective way? So I'll give you an example.
Yes.
I founded a company called Immunil.
Yeah.
And I founded that company, which is a CAR T therapy company, with a very famous oncologist called Siddharth Mukherjee. Because he and I met in New York, and he said, how come India does not have a single CAR T company? And China has so many. And we should put India on the map of the world.
Okay.
So I said, okay, let's start it. And once I decided to get into starting that company, I had to really think about a strategy. And that strategy was about, how am I going to develop a CAR T in India, and how do I give credibility to India? It's not just about, you can develop a CAR T in any way. But what is it that we need to do to basically create a differentiated story in CAR T? So I got together a very smart group of scientists. I, of course, in-licensed the first CAR T from Spain because they had a lot of good data. I've done this before with a Cuban antibody. And I said, this way, I've seen the human data, it's very good. And if I can, use that data to develop a CAR T therapy for India at low cost, that is the first part of my journey. But leveraging that technology and all that goes with it to do something completely different and create very high value IP after that was my goal. So I think, you have to conceptualize your strategy of how do you want to grow this company. So it's not about being reactive to something or just go for it. You're right. You have to be very deliberate
Yes.
and slow about
Yes.
how you want to build that
Yes.
approach. So today, Immunil is at a stage where we have got a fantastic innovative pipeline.
Wow.
It is not just about getting into the market. A lot of people only focus about how do I get into the market with anything. It's not about that. It's about, okay, you can get into the market with one product, but what's your pipeline? How are you going to sustain, endure, and grow your business? That is really what my style of entrepreneurship is about. So, whilst I started, for example, with insulin, I didn't stop at recombinant human insulin. I went into insulin analogs. I then said, look, we also have to get into antibodies. And it was both about novel and biosimilars. And today, of course, our biosimilars are really very successful as a segment because when we started on biosimilars, there were no international guidelines.
None.
And I kept telling my colleagues, it will come. Just follow the science. And obviously, we were very well aligned to the science.
And you were there when the...
Exactly.
Yes.
And we were the first company globally to be approved for biosimilar Herceptin, biosimilar pegfilgrastim, interchangeable insulin glargine. It was all because our science was so high. So I just think that you have to believe in what you're doing and have that scientific rigor in what you're doing. And then you, as you very rightly said, Ajay, you must have a very long and well thought out strategy. It's not about being reactive. It's not about being impulsive. It's not about being satisfied with getting one product in the market.
I saw this amazing movie. There was a dialogue there where they said, armies win kingdoms, alliances create empires. And I actually think you're the empress of alliances, and I'll tell you how. You align with this Irish businessman, the company gets sold to Unilever, you get an alliance with Unilever. Then you have various alliances, whether you produce, you sell to someone, you produce API, someone sells formulations. Then a dear friend, Rajiv Malik, common friend, you align with Mylan, and then you acquire the business and you M&As. Importance of partnerships and the acquisitions you are doing. What should an entrepreneur see in acquisitions and what are the compromises you have to make?
Wow, the way you've described alliances, I must remember that line. But I've always believed that alliances are very important to learn new things. Like
Wow.
the alliance that we had with Mylan was about understanding each other's strengths.
Yes.
And making sure that you have these complementary synergistic strengths which actually forge a very strong partnership. So I've always believed in that. And the partnership we had with Mylan or Viatris was really about, it started with the fact that we were developing biosimilars and we realized it was a very expensive business.
Absolutely.
Viatris wanted to actually get a second bolus of growth from biosimilars. And they thought, wow, this is a good partnership to have. And Viatris was very strong commercially. And so we forged this wonderful partnership where we did all the R&D and manufacturing, which we were very good at.
Absolutely.
And, Viatris took on the whole responsibility of understanding the regulatory requirements and finally commercializing the products in global markets. Yes. And that partnership worked very well because it was a very complementary partnership and, we worked very well together because each one of us brought strengths, which as equal partners. Even though, of course, the financial split was different because they put in more money. And rightly so, because I think this business was a very expensive business to get into in the first place. And without Viatris, we could not have had the financial muscle to develop such a robust pipeline. So what we did was, we did this for several years, and it was a very successful partnership. And then there came a point when Viatris came to us saying, this is a very important business, but it's not reflecting in our overall market cap.
Okay.
For the simple reason that the biosimilars business is a very small part of our business as yet. And therefore is getting kind of merged in the rest of our generics business, and we're not getting the true value of the biosimilars business. So I think we should, cull out the biosimilars business into a different entity. And why don't we form a joint venture?
Okay.
And I said to them, I've never believed in joint ventures because somehow it never works. There is always going to be a bit of a competitiveness in terms of who gets more.
What?
And therefore, I'd rather, make a counter offer to you saying, why don't I buy you out?
Interesting.
Okay. And I think it worked well because I said to myself that, we actually wanted to become a global company. And I said, until you build your own brand, you cannot be a global company.
Yes. Yes.
You might be doing all the heavy lifting, you
Yeah.
might be doing the great stuff back end, but unless you're actually front ending the business, you never build a great global brand. I said, no, I know it's a very expensive acquisition, on the face of it.
Yeah.
But I think long term, it will make us into truly a global biologics, biosimilars company. I was willing to take that risk. And I thought about it a lot, just like we discussed a little while ago.
Yes.
Saying that there will be a short period of challenge, but it'll become a hugely successful opportunity in the future. And that's what led me to say, okay, let's go for it. And so we made this largest acquisition in Indian pharma history.
$3 billion.
$3.3 billion. And of course, part cash, part stock.
Yes.
And it was, a $2 billion cash payout.
And $1 billion, yes.
Yeah. And, a little over 2 billion, in fact. But I think in the long run, that's really made us into a truly recognized global biosimilars company out of India.
Yes.
Today, we are amongst the top five
already
in the world already. And I have no doubt about it. My goal is that by 2030, we must be the number one biosimilars company in the world. That's the goal I've set myself. And I'm sure we have a lot of opportunities to get there because, of course, we now have a very good pipeline of products. We have great market visibility. We have great market share. We have now a great brand recognition.
Absolutely.
And I'm determined to build that strong brand for brand Biocon.
Now, quick question on this Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh and letting go, passing the baton. One of your favorite businesses you actually sold in 2007, a baby you'd built. The only, where you said, okay, and you sold it to your competitor, Enzymes. Briefly tell me, what is the thought process and when do you decide this is not for me anymore?
I think as an entrepreneur, you have to keep reinventing yourself. Okay, and you have to evolve. And certain businesses that historically made a lot of sense, you do need to kind of hive them off from time to time when you feel that you need to invest in something else. So I've also believed that that's extremely important for an entrepreneur. Don't get too emotionally tied to any of your businesses when they stop making sense, because Enzymes was a very important business for me in the first 20 years of my entrepreneurial journey, right? Because that's all I was doing.
That's what made
developing technology.
Yes.
But there came a time when we pivoted to biopharma that I had to invest a lot more in biopharma. And if I had to do that, I had to not invest that much in enzymes. Now, I think it's unfair not to invest in enzymes because enzymes too had a great
growth
future.
business. Exactly.
It was a growth business. But I had to, deviate or divert all my investment to biopharma because that's where I'd set my eyes. So I don't think it's good to basically starve a growth potential business like enzymes. And therefore, I sold it to Novozymes, who anyway had a good enzymes business and who could give me a good value for the business I had built. So we got a very good value for that business at that time when we divested our enzymes business. And I'm glad to see that even today that business is growing thanks to the fact that Novozymes continues to invest in enzymes. Now, when it comes to our biopharma business, even there is going to be a parts of our businesses which become historically mature, sometimes irrelevant because you're trying to get into two new businesses. I will be, divesting those kind of businesses over time, saying, okay, now we want to focus on X, Y, and Z. We need to divest something to invest more in these new businesses. So I think there's a cyclical phase of every business which you need to get out of, right? If you want to move from one segment to another or a new business, you've got to also divest your old businesses. So I think there is that cycle that you have to accept.
Okay.
So nothing remains forever. You know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you want to remain wedded to something forever, you will miss out on new opportunities. That's what I believe in.
Element of luck or serendipity or gratitude, how I don't know how to define it, where you meet an Irish businessman, you meet this Mr. Biswas who doesn't want any money, then you meet this person in Canara Bank who's willing to give you a loan just like Mr. Kamath gave Dhirubhai Ambani, right? So at times in life we meet people.
But it is not always serendipity because there is an element of effort and preparedness, right? So it's not like, the Canara Bank manager just...
No, it did not fall in your lap. You have to go to the bank.
I mean, no, basically I'm saying when you keep knocking at different doors, one door will open, right? So it's that kind of an effort you need to put in. And I've never taken no for an answer. So you have to endure. You have to work at it. If you believe in something, you will, find a way out. That's what I've always believed in. Like if you really believe in something, that grit is really endurance. Like you will find a way out. You will find a solution. It's a problem-solving approach, right? You're so hell-bent on doing something. When you're hell-bent on doing something, you will find a solution in some way. That's the way I believed in building businesses. Don't give up that easily. I find a lot of young entrepreneurs, the first obstacle they come across, they give up. And I said, look, an entrepreneurial journey is fraught with risk and obstacles. If you're going to give up so easily, you're not an entrepreneur. But if you're a true entrepreneur, you will be at it. And in fact, I've seen this in many of the successful entrepreneurs that I have mentored along the way. Many of them who keep coming to me saying, I'm not able to do this, I'm not able to do that. And I'm saying, you have to go at it. I mean, all I can tell you is, don't give up.
Just don't give up.
Just don't give up. Stay with it if you believe in it. And I can tell you that most of those people who have followed that advice have done very well.
In fact, we had this professor at IMA, Indira Parekh. She used to teach organizational behavior. And I remember she said there are two types of people in the world. Theory X, roz danda karo, ask questions every day, this happened. And few people are theory Y, who are at it, full energy, don't give up. And Kiran, you are by far the most theory Y person I've met. People like you, Rashesh, Mother Teresa. I keep telling this. In fact, on a CNBC video, I went on record and said this. There are very few theory Y people and they definitely change the world. And
and I think, purpose is very important. I mean, you cannot be just building a business for the sake of building a business. There has to be an underlying purpose. So you have to find that strategic purpose. Why are you doing it, right? And for me, that purpose has always been to disrupt the status quo, right? Why are biologics so expensive? Can't I make them cheaper? Can't I make them more affordable? That's been my driving purpose, saying, the world needs affordable
Yes,
biologics.
that's
It's
great.
not just about biosimilars, but biologics in general. And so I've done everything at scale because I know that economies of scale are very important when you have that kind of a purpose. You've got to take big risks. You've got to take big bets. But to take those big bets and big risks, you need a very strong driving purpose, right?
Absolutely.
That's what it's about. And you've got to believe in it. And I always tell investors as well. Investors today are very short term. That's my concern. I'm saying, guys, investors must also have what they describe as patient capital.
Yes.
When you're trying to build something big, it cannot be done in a day. It takes time. And that's why I also believe that investors too need to walk the talk with you. Not just make all these promises ahead of time and then, start behaving like a typical, investor saying, I want my money back. Now, that is not the way to build businesses. I was just trying to tell a few investors, I said, look what Biocon is trying to build, okay? We are the only large, global leading biosimilars company out of India.
Absolutely.
Right? Why would you trip us up? Why would you not support us? Because you have to build these big businesses out of India. And to do that, you need the support. I mean, I keep telling people, look at how companies in Korea, companies in China have been supported by their bankers and government.
Absolutely.
Saying, no, we have to build these global leading companies out of our country. And that's what we are looking at, saying Biocon is not any old company. It's a very unique company. It is a pure play biosimilars story, now a peptides led company. We've shown and demonstrated success in innovative products, in biosimilars, in very differentiated specialty generics, in everything we've done, and research services. Again, that's a business that we actually led right from the start. Every one of those businesses have been very unique businesses, and it takes time to build them up to a certain scale. But I think we need patient capital. We need that feeling that we are building these national brands. People like
National
Dhirubhai.
champions.
Yeah, and whether you talk about Dhirubhai Ambani, whether you talk about any of the big companies, it is the erudite bankers and investors who have stayed with them to build these big companies. And so I want to see that kind of support coming in from all the investors in these unique businesses. I think that's very important. Otherwise, you'll never build big brands and you'll never be able to build big companies out of India. Because if everyone is just looking at exits and just very short-term thinking, you cannot build such big companies. I mean, you look at what America does, right? I mean, Elon Musk has the same story where he has these wild ideas and he almost goes bankrupt, but the banks come to his rescue.
Absolutely.
So I think you need these kind of support systems in every country to build these big companies. Otherwise, you will not do that or not be able to do that, and you will constantly basically shortchange companies because of your short-term views. That's my take on investing in creating big companies in India. I think today of course, the tech, segment is very rife.
Yes.
And you have a lot of very innovative tech companies. But many of those remain stunted or just exit at very small scale because people are in a hurry, both the entrepreneurs and the investors. They want to make a quick buck. And then how do you build big companies? How are you going to build the Nvidias or any of the big tech companies, right? I mean, our software services companies, of course, have built scale, but they are services companies. Now, if you want to build product companies in the tech space, you need scale. And to build scale, you need time, you need patient capital. and you need a lot of power behind these companies to build those kind of global brands. So I think as a country, we are in a very good position today because I think we have the talent, we have the opportunities,
bit of risk capital,
but we need patient capital. That patient capital is not risk capital.
No, it's not.
Patient capital is really about building scale, building these global businesses.
Absolutely.
So there's a big difference between risk capital, which is at the start, but you need that patient capital at the end.
I got Weber, who's looking at the cameras and all. I lost a few people in my family to falls at home and bathroom. So we're actually seeding a company in Bangalore to end-to-end prevent falls. Next time we'll talk about it. But Kiran, this was wonderful.
Thank you, Ajay.
It was just wonderful.
Thank you so much.
So much.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Thank
For every parent, protection from falls.